Alright, let's get this over with. I do not like The Walking Dead: A New Frontier, and it's sad to see it fall so far from grace. Quick reminder that this is my opinion. I feel like they should have introduced our new characters earlier in a 6th episode for Season 2. That gets us introduced to Javier and everyone else in an easier way instead of shoving flashbacks down our throats. Hear me out, you have a 6th episode in Season 2 that shows us the flashbacks and who Javier and everyone else is. Then, at the beginning of Season 3, you show all of Clementine's flashbacks while still playing as her. And then after everything's done, you play as Javi and show Clementine when she first appears in Episode 1 after knowing what happened, explaining why she's the way she is now. Feels a lot smoother, doesn't it? And for what it's worth, I think that the characters in this game are decent, but needed more time in the oven. Also, I'm not a fan of the glossy art that's used in this game, and thankfully they don't keep it in Season 4. The pacing isn't the best either, but I'll talk more about that later. And if I'm correct, this is around the time that Skybound started to get involved. I don't have an idea if that hurt the game or not. Enough rambling, let's get on with the story. Oh boy, is this a weird episode. It's a weird, almost kind of love-hate relationship, except it's mostly disliking this episode. Starting the game on the very first day of the apocalypse, you begin episode 1 playing as Javier Garcia, who used to play baseball professionally. You are running to your father's house, who just passed away. When you get there, we meet David, who is Javi's brother, Kate, who is David's wife, David's kids, Mariana, and Gabe. We also meet David and Javi's mom, and Hector, which I don't know the relation to, and I also don't care. Your dad has just turned and proceeds to bite your mom and Hector. You decide to split up to the hospital, and the flashback ends, and I already want to end my suffering and shut this game off. 4 years later, meaning that this game takes place in 2007, you are driving in a van with Mariana, Kate, and Gabe. After smoking weed, you stop at a junkyard to collect supplies, and after siphoning gas, you find a building which has lots of supplies. While outside, you get held up by a group, and after one of them finds out where your family is, you have to kill them. You then get knocked out and wake up in a truck with your hands tied. The truck then proceeds to crash, and you get the choice to kill the man who is driving or let him live. You then get robbed by the one and only Clementine, who is the single best part of this game, and who I choose to side with for everything because I don't care about any other character in this game. Then tell her about your situation, and you start walking with her. Also, AJ is gone, but I'll touch more on that later. You can tell that Clem is a lot more stern and is a lot more independent. You see a horde moving, and you decide to head to a nearby town to stay the night. You get to Prescott, walkers are blocking your way in, and Clementine's gun is only shooting blanks. You get inside and meet Tripp, who is basically the person who runs Prescott, and then head to a bar while Clem is talking to someone. You then get recognized by a man named Conrad and help a woman named Francine with poker. Conversation with the man and Clementine starts getting heated, so you go to check it out and find out the man traded her bullets that don't fire in exchange for batteries. The man then proceeds to pull out a knife and stabs you on the eyebrow, and eventually Clementine accidentally shoots him, prompting Tripp to put you guys in a cell, but he offers to get a woman named Eleanor to clean your eye. After she's done, she makes an offer to leave in the morning to find your family. Tripp also offers, and you get to choose who you go with. Now we enter our first Clementine flashback. In Wellington, you are hanging out with AJ when Edith, who is the person who let you in Wellington, comes in your room and tells you to pack your things because Wellington is being attacked by a group. You eventually leave Wellington and Edith gets shot, forcing you to run away with just AJ. Now's a good time to bring up the customization. You can go with Clementine. Depending on which ending you chose at the end of Season 2, you get a scar that stays with you until the end of the series. If you stayed with Jane, you get a tattoo of AJ's name. If you stayed with Kenny, I believe you get a scar from a car crash. And if you stayed in Wellington, you get a scar from a bullet grazing your cheek. And if you went alone, you lose your finger from a car. In the morning, you get to a junkyard and find Mariana, Kate, and Gabe. And right when you're about to leave for Prescott, Mariana gets shot by the same group that attacked you. Kate also gets shot in the stomach, and you get to choose to stay and fight the group with Clementine or go with your family. I chose to stay, and in doing so, a flashbang ends the episode. There are a lot of things I dislike. For one, the pacing is weird, as well as the voice acting being bad. I actually hate the art style, with everyone having glossy eyes, and the characters aren't great as well. If you're playing as Clementine, then you can easily overlook these characters, but for God's sake, the character you are playing as feels hollow, which is not a very good thing. I think for now I'm going to give episode 1, Ties That Bond Part 1, I hate that title too, a 4 out of 10, only for Clementine and the relationship between Mariana and Javi. I'll admit that I actually like episodes 2 and 3. They aren't anywhere near the level of season 2, but they're just pretty solid episodes. We begin episode 2 in a flashback where you bond with Kate, and I'll admit that Javi and Kate's relationship is pretty good. You wake up and the group that you were fighting ran off, and you proceed to bury Mariana while dealing with some awful voice acting from Jeff Shine, who voices Javi. You then learn that the group that attacked you is called the New Frontier, and that Clementine was stuck with them for a little bit. Make it back to Prescott, and then the New Frontier comes along, and no matter what you do, a fight breaks out, and Prescott gets overrun by walkers, and you're forced to leave with Clem, Tripp, Eleanor, Conrad, Gabe, and Kate. The group then decides to go to Richmond, which is a massive community. While getting a path open so they can get to Richmond, walkers show up, and Eleanor drives Kate towards Richmond while the rest of the group gets to a roof of a building. And there you meet Jesus, who, if you don't know, is from the comics and the show. He explains that Richmond is now owned by the New Frontier, but he offers to take you there by using old tunnels. And go into another Clementine flashback where you see her join the New Frontier because of AJ needing food. You also meet Ava, but we'll learn more about her later. Clementine then shows you that she has a New Frontier mark on her and that she needs to leave before you get to Richmond. Walkers then start coming, and on your way out, Conrad holds you up and wants to use Clem as a bargaining chip for the New Frontier. You then get to choose to shoot him or use Clementine, and to be honest, I never go for the second option, so I really don't know what happens if you pick it. If you picked the first option, Conrad dies, and Clementine splits up with you. When you make it out, you find Kate, and then find Richmond, and when you get there, you find David, who, if you forgot, is your brother, and is also one of the leaders of the New Frontier, and then the episode ends right there. This episode feels really short, and maybe that's why I like it. It's fast-paced and has some pretty nice moments of character building, but then I remember that it's part of this game, and I cry. But overall, I'm going to give episode 2, Ties That Bond Part 2, wish that title was something like Walking Dead Revenge of the New Frontier or something, a 7.5 out of 10. I want to take a quick break because I feel like we all need it just to talk about the Definitive Edition and the game minis itself. The Definitive Edition isn't just a hub for all the games. It has a few extra things like the developer commentary, which I've used a little bit for this video. It also has a character viewer, an art viewer, and all of the game's soundtracks, and as well as the normal settings and credits. I think it's obvious to say that the menus of every game is one of the most important things about the game because it's the first impression of said game. Season 1's menu is great. It's just a simple picture of Herschel's farm with the 5 options to pick. Same thing with Season 2, except whichever episode you're on, it shows a different picture, which is pretty cool. Season 3 is fine, except it's more modern, which doesn't carry the charm of the first 2 games, as well as the episodes having a freaking description to them, which I dislike a lot. But that's just pretty nitpicky from me. Season 2 is a mix of the first 2 and the third, and for some reason, I love this one, as well as how the episodes look. Anyways, that's it for now. Back to the unfortunate game that is The New Frontier. After playing this episode, I start to ask myself something. Do I really hate this game? No. This game is bad. I've already said it. There's no turning back. As soon as I say something, I can't take it back. Episode 3 is pretty solid, though, and it's probably tied with Episode 2. It's pretty fun, and it's the perfect length. You begin Episode 3 in another flashback, 3 months after the outbreak happened, and it shows you, Kate, Gabe, and Mariana leaving in the van. It then cuts to seeing David and him taking your family in while putting the rest of your group in quarantine. David comes back and takes you to the hospital to see Kate, and while heading there, you meet Ava, this time as Javi. You also tell David about what happened about the New Frontier killing Mariana, and he tells you that he had nothing to do with it, but tells you to keep quiet about it. At the hospital, you meet Dr. Lingard, who is one of the other leaders apart from David, and when you see Kate, she says that it's not safe and that they might have to leave. David then takes you to meet the other 2 leaders, and when you get there, you meet Clint and Joan. Joan then confronts you about what happened outside the walls, and they proceed to kick you, Tripp, and Jesus out of Richmond, with some supplies that David packed for you. It gives you a map which tells you where to go, and also gives you a baseball bat for comedic value. After getting attacked by walkers, Clementine saves you and then leads into another flashback after you talk about David. The flashback shows Clementine and a sick AJ trying to get medicine from the New Frontier, David then catches you and kicks you out of the New Frontier and then keeps AJ. And the flashback then ends. You eventually get to a factory, and while inside, David comes in, and after Clem attacks him, he tells her that AJ is alive. You find out that the factory has stolen supplies from all different communities, and then you hear noises and find out that it's Max, Badger, and Lonnie who are working under Joan's orders to survive. After fighting them, you get to leave Max alive to help confront Joan or kill him. When you get back to Richmond, you split up with Clementine and go find Kate and Gabe. When you find Kate and Gabe, you get to stick with David's plan or go on your own with Kate. I chose to stick with David. You eventually get to where David is, leaving Kay and Gabe at David's house, but no matter what you do, Joan throws you and David in prison, and the episode ends right there. This episode has a lot to unpack, and I know I'm not doing it justice, and if anyone wants, I'll do full summary videos on these games, ignoring the full review part. Overall, it's a good episode, and it's well-paced. Also, the AJ flashback really got me tearing up for a second. So, for now, episode 3, Above the Law, is another 7.5 out of 10. Okay, this episode is pretty good. It's another situation with episodes 2 and 3, and it once again makes me ask myself the same question. Do I like this game? No. This game is bad. The voice acting is bad. This game is bad. We begin episode 4 in a flashback where you are in a batting cage with David, and he talks about how much he missed the army and asks you to take care of his family if something happens. You then cut back to the present where you and David are in a cell, and you get to choose to argue with him or keep calm. Joan eventually comes in and takes David away, and you escape either with Kate or Gabe, I believe. After seeing some cool visuals, you get to Eleanor's apartment, and you hear Tripp failing to shoot a shot with Eleanor. Poor guy. Find out that there's a massive herd outside the walls, so you decide to get guns because you're not safe inside or outside Richmond. You, Gabe, and Ava then head to the armory, and while you're heading outside, Gabe attacks a guy, and you end up getting stabbed while saving him. Then go to the hospital to see Dr. Lingard, and when you get there, you find Clem, and while she stitches you up, you head into another flashback. In our final flashback for Clem, it shows Clementine talking to Ava after they took AJ from her, which is great for Ava's character development, or it ends up showing Jane or Kenny if you picked them to be alive. After she stitches you up, Lingard wakes up and offers to give AJ's location in exchange for you helping him out with his suicide. He tells you that there's no hope for David and that David taught Lingard how to be happy. He chose to kill Lingard, and before he dies, he tells Clem that AJ is at the McCarroll Ranch. You then get back to Eleanor's place, and after deciding to steal a truck, Gabe has a mood swing and talks about Conrad, which makes Tripp and Eleanor immediately hate you, which I find to be incredibly stupid. You get to the area you need to go and steal a truck. While waiting for the sun to come up, Clem and Gabe bond, and Kate asks you if you want to be in a relationship with her, and I chose yes because I don't know. Ava calls you and says that the announcement that was planned is actually a hanging for David, and then she gets cut off. When you get to the town square, Joan immediately notices you and explains that Eleanor ratted you out. I think that Joan is a decent villain for what it's worth, not because she's scary like Carver, but because she has political power and every civilian trusts her, but she's still underdeveloped. She then gives you the option to save Tripp or Ava, but the catch is whoever you choose to save ends up getting shot. I chose to get Tripp killed due to heads or tails. Clint then makes an offer for you to leave with your group and never come back to Richmond, and you get the option to comply with it or shoot Joan in the head. I chose to go with the deal, but David messes it up and kills Clint and then chases after Joan. A firefight breaks out, and it leads to Kate accidentally ramming into the tanker truck, which leads it to explode and for walkers to breach Richmond, and the episode ends right there. This episode is pretty solid. It's short, which I find great. It also sets up for a great finale. There isn't much to say about this episode, though. It's just a very solid episode. So for now, I'm going to give episode 4, Thicker Than Water, an 8 out of 10. Damn it, I like this game. This makes me so mad because even in my first video, I said that this game is bad. But I might just have a lizard brain now because this is a very solid entry in the franchise, and a lot of the stuff I say is just nitpicky. Episode 5 is a great conclusion to this Garcia story that we've experienced. It's also a pretty miserable story that we get to experience, and you know how much I love miserable things. Episode 5 begins with our last flashback, and it shows us when David and Javi found out about their dad's cancer. After David leaves, your father asks you to stay close with David, and you get the option to promise him or not. Cuts back to what happened at the end of episode 4 with walkers flooding into Richmond. You eventually get inside a building with David, Gabe, Clem, and Kate. Clem, David, and Gabe go to check some insurances while you and Kate try to make things right. You find Eleanor with someone who's been bit, and after their group comes back, you get the option to cut the man's arm off or let him be. Either way, his spouse ends up pointing a gun at you, and then David breaks her arm and proceeds to scare everyone in the room. Then he heads up to the roof, and you follow him, and after talking with him, the rest of the group shows up, including Tripp or Ava, depending on who lived in the last episode. You then make a plan to save Richmond, and to do so, you have to cross an overpass. While crossing it, you and Gabe have a really nice moment, and while crossing a thin ledge, Tripp or Ava gets attacked by a walker. If it's Ava who gets attacked, she falls off and dies, and Tripp ends up dying by walkers when you cross a helicopter. When you get to the water tower, and in order to get the vehicles, you have to do the mandatory walker gut section in every season. David decides that it's best to leave Richmond behind, while Kate wants to save Richmond, and that eventually leads to a fight between you and David, giving you the option to honor your father's wishes by not fighting him, or just fight him. I will admit that I love David and Javi's relationship because of how realistic it feels. Ultimately ends with David and Gabe leaving, and this is where things get confusing. Depending on your relationship with Clem, she either goes after Gabe or goes with Kate, and you get to go with either of them. I chose Kate because if you don't go with her, she dies, and it's almost 50-50 with Gabe because sometimes he dies, sometimes he doesn't, and with David, sometimes he dies, and sometimes he doesn't. So it's just weird. But I happily got the best ending with Kate and Gabe both living. The whole sequence ends after Jesus and his group round up the walkers. 3 days later, you're visiting a memorial in the church, and when you come outside, Jesus greets you and offers you the idea of running Richmond. After he leaves, Clem asks you if you can give her a haircut, and she decides it's best to leave and find AJ. Season ends after she leaves, but it has a post-credit scene of her killing walkers, which is pretty cool. I really like this episode. I like all of the endings, and this may be the worst one, but it's still great nonetheless. So, for now, my rating for episode 5 from the Gallows is getting a 9 out of 10. I went too hard on this game in the beginning. At first, I wasn't accepting it for what it truly is, a side story. Now, sure, this game can just be classified as filler because it is. The whole purpose of it is to get Clementine to the final season. Now, there are points I don't like. The voice acting is a big standout to me, as well as the graphics having a blurry effect. It's weird to explain. The pacing is also kind of weird for the season, but it is still a good story, and I didn't get it enough credit. Oh, my rating for The Walking Dead: A New Frontier is going to be a 8.8? 8.9? 9 out of 10? We'll just do 9 out of 10. That's the easiest option. 9 out of 10 is the final answer. Well, we've officially made it onto the final season, and I don't know how to feel. I'm happy for this to be over, but I don't think I want to let go yet. But that's for the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you when I cover The Walking Dead: The final season.